All right, hello and welcome class tonight. I'm sure we'll have some people joining in as we're going along. Thanks for being here. Um, just we'll go through and do some lecture tonight, answer some questions, and moving in. We are in week 11. I hope everyone's doing okay. Oh, look at that. It tells me now I can share two desktops at a time. That's pretty slick. I won't do that, but didn't know that you could do that. Move this over a little bit. I think I'm going to pull this to this side here. And okay. So let's take a look at assignments that are coming up here pretty quick. I think you can see my screen. Our program identification is due today. The assessment instrument evaluation, I went through that, graded it, gave you some feedback, and then we start moving on. Article review, just find an article, make sure that you do a brief write-up. This is just kind of pushing you towards getting something for your actual final project and the rest. You got the article review, you have an assessment creation assignment that's due on the 20th, and then you get your final project that are there. So this program identification should be directly linked to the final project. So that's really what the goal is to make sure that you choose something that you plan on doing your final project. If you have questions, please let me know. Happy to chat if you need the help or kind of thinking through what you're going to be doing. And that's it for what's coming up. Anyone have questions before we get into some of the content and stuff for tonight? Any questions for me? Questions, concerns, anything along those lines? All right. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Isn't that how it works? Anyway, okay. Well, I just sorry that I wasn't there with you guys last week. I was in Spain. I don't feel too bad because it was kind of nice, but I'm sure that you were really sad that we missed hanging out. It was fun. It was beautiful. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Spain, but I enjoyed it. Good time. The best part about it is my wife is a fluent Spanish speaker, so it made it very easy for us to travel. She could help with everything. Although the true Spaniards do have a little bit of an accent, which is a little different, but that's okay. I could really tell. I mean, I could still tell, but it was awesome because my wife's really, it was fun. Okay, so let's go through and talk a little bit about outcomes. So let's just make sure that we understand why we're doing what we're doing. I want to look at this really fast and show you kind of why we're doing the different things that we're doing. As you look at your program assignment, we talked about assessment and measurement in the first few weeks. There's some assignments associated with that. Your final assignment is the program evaluation. I want you to see that as you go through this, all these pieces are part of what you might do in a regular evaluation or an evaluation of some type of educational endeavor. So we talked the first week a little bit about kind of looking at what program evaluation is, looking at program outcomes. Talked last week about needs assessment. Specifically, we looked at some of the ways that you could do it with improvement science and making it very important and relevant to what you're looking at. Today, we're going to talk about what it looks like to create and measure outcomes, how they differ from some of the other things that we're doing. We'll talk about that. It's important for us to consider. Next week, we'll talk about logic models. They sound really boring, but logic models are a really great way for you to scope and plan any type of measurement or evaluation or project you may be doing in your school, in your school district, or whatever you're involved in. Really useful way. It's also helpful if you ever decide to write a grant. Logic models are part of that as well, so we'll talk about those. We'll talk about cost analysis, which I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer. I want you to make sure you're using my money well. So that's another focus that we're going to do. Could be part of what you're doing as well. We'll talk about experimental program evaluation if you did one, and then we'll talk about qualitative. So all of these could be components of your evaluation. Okay, so that's why I'm doing it. I'm not just giving them to you to just give you random information. They are pieces and parts of what you're looking at with your final assignment. So today we're going to talk a little bit about outcome measurements and kind of thinking about what we do with those and how that is important in the realm of evaluation and the rest. And not just in evaluation, but what you may be actually seeing when you're going into measuring or looking at or thinking about outcomes in any type of work that you're doing around in schools and in education as a whole. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. Okay. So just so you get this idea, and ask questions as you have them, but just to kind of keep this in the forefront of what we're talking about, when we talk about outcome measures, we're really looking at what is happening as a result of what we're doing, what changes occur because of whatever we're trying to do. So outcome is the actual finished, done, this is what happened. So we offered an intervention, we offered tutoring, we offered whatever we're going to do. What was the result of that program, whatever offering we're doing, that outcome that you're looking at? So we're looking to measure the outcome. So before you even get there, I want you to understand that in order to really get a measure, you have to know what is going to be changed as a result of what you're doing. So at the very beginning of any type of scoping or developing or putting together some type of program evaluation or some measure, you have to have a really clear picture of what it is that you expect to see different as a result of what you're doing. Now, I know that sounds basic, but keep in mind, if I were to go in and say, I want to offer tutoring to students, well, what do I expect to see different as a result of tutoring? Is it test scores? Is it some type of end of year test score? Is it a closer to the time frame formative assessment measure? Is it the quality of the homework that they're actually turning in? Is their thought process? What is the tutoring supposed to impact? Maybe it's all of those things. So as you're going in and doing these things, it really want to make sure what is it that I expect to see different? And we also could really link some of these we can link some of these things to program theory. So if we were to say, as a result of what we're doing, we expect to see changes in behaviors in students, therefore changes in behaviors or changes in outcomes as they go along. And then also stakeholder priorities. What is most important to them? It may not be what's important to you, it's what's important to those you're actually working with. When we talk about stakeholders, those could be the students, could be the parents, could be the district, could be the principal, whatever it is. Now, this will become way more relevant next week when we talk about logic models. But when we think about this, there's this idea of outputs and outcomes. The outputs are the things that you're doing. So if you're offering tutoring, if you're giving some extra time after school, if you are giving resources that are virtual resources that they can use at home, those are the things that they're the outputs. Those are the things that you're actually doing. And as a result of those outputs, what changes? Those are your outcomes. Just keep those separated. Okay. How do we know if educational programs are achieving meaningful, measurable impact? Measurable is a tricky one. So that's going to be our goal for today. When you're starting to think about your program, what you plan to do, what you plan to propose in your actual program evaluation, this is a key part. What is it that you're actually trying to achieve? What does that meaningfully look like when you're talking about impact? Keep that. That's what we're talking about with outcomes today or tonight. Okay. So here's a couple of these ideas of these core concepts for us to make sure that we understand what we're looking at when we talk about it. Outcomes really are observable change of participants or systems. So what we're looking at is student growth and math fluency. Pretty basic. Outcome level is the current status at a given time. If you're looking at levels, and again, you may not be able to identify these levels well, but you might be able to. 68% reading on a grade level test. That's fine if you can do that, if you can measure. If you've got that finite kind of measure, tutoring may not be one that you can do. If you're looking at trying to impact how teachers perform in a classroom, you may not have a really great level that you can actually measure or articulate across the time frame. If you're having teachers participate in professional learning to be able to see if they can improve their teaching instruction or their instructional capacity, you may not have something that says they're at 58%, 85%, something along those lines. You may not have that. So it just depends upon how you're actually measuring it. Outcome change. So an outcome change implies the fact that you've done some type of pre or post, something that you've done a start on, something you've done the end on. So if you've done gain between two data points, gain in test scores, gain in fluency levels, gain in number of students who've passed the test or passed the course because of the instructional process that you're reinforcing with your teachers through professional learning, however that works. And then the program effect. You really want to be able to say, as a result of what you're doing, these are the things that are changing. Okay. These are kind of core concepts, concepts that you're actually looking at. Okay. So let's talk about it. So I threw in a couple of different ways that we've thought about outcomes and looking at it from the research. If you're going in and actually looking at some research to support what you're trying to do, I want you to kind of think of how we look at some of the work that's being done around this measurement. Process evaluation is different than what we talk about with outcomes. Process really is looking at a formative process of what you're actually measuring. What are the things that you're doing to get to the outcomes? Is it actually implemented well? Is it done? There's so much work done in this. We could have classes, degrees just on this idea of process evaluation. It is what's happening during the outcome is what happens at the end. What changed in the target population as a result of what you're doing. So if I'm going to go in and I want to be able to impact students' engagement in school by offering art programs, the art program is what you're actually doing. How well you implement it would be the measure of the process that you're looking at. But the outcome really is going to be measuring engagement in school. So you have to have some good type, some way of being able to measure the outcome of engagement, whatever that may be. That could be attendance. It could be how they, you could ask teachers to measure engagement in a classroom based upon questions, responses to questions, participation, any of those kinds of things. Okay. And then impact evaluation, how much change was due to the actual program. Yes, there's definite overlap between an impact and an outcome evaluation, but impact really is saying how much of it actually has changed. So some of these things that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years, you may actually have been involved in them or seen some of these in the schools. We've seen some of the ESSA work where they gave a lot of money when COVID came out, when we had COVID in 2020, they gave a lot of money to schools. And because of that, ESSA allowed us to be able to do certain things. And when that happened, we saw that they came in and they said, what are these evidence-based improvement tiers? And this was something that was done in the What Works Clearinghouse, which unfortunately I don't believe it exists anymore. They may bring it back, but as of right now, with a cut in the Department of Education, it's going away. But it's really looking to say, how much evidence do you actually have? I'm reading right now for the EIR grants, the mid and the end phase of these grants. And they've now added evidence reviewers into these grants, which is great. But these evidence reviewers really do look at these improvement tiers. How much has been impacted based upon the evidence that you're producing? What kind of evidence can you produce? And therefore, how can you place that in those tiers? That's kind of new. There's also been a real focus on equity and access, and then clearly learning recovery. Equity and access specifically because we know that students in that were coming from a greater level of poverty had less access to some of the resources that were available to others, and so they were more greatly impacted by the shutdown of schools, very much so in California. And this learning recovery is a real thing. Those of us who are teaching elementary school, especially the early grades, are seeing some kids who are struggling behaviorally and academically as a result of some of this. And then also looking at some of the SEL. Some of this is being tied into some of the frameworks that we're actually seeing. Okay, theory in the past, here's some of this harder stuff to kind of say, here's what we would actually do. So when you think about what you may be looking at outcomes, what are you measuring? What are you going to tie into your evaluation? There's several things, but these are the 4 ones that will really happen in education by and large. Academic is going to be your most commonly seen outcomes. CAS scores, literacy gain, math, but there's examples that you have in there, dashboard things with CCI and the rest that you may have. Totally appropriate. You can use those as any of your outcomes. Sometimes you may be looking specifically at behavioral outcomes. So chronic absenteeism is a behavioral outcome. How do they actually behave? Suspension rates are behavioral outcomes that you're actually looking at. You can actually look at specifically in classrooms or in classes, school, how many times kids are sent out of class, in-house suspensions or or truancy problems that they're actually having, or how many times you have behavioral issues in a classroom that you have. That's totally fine as well. Affective outcomes, where we could be looking at some type of SEL stuff. So some of us would looked at some of the assessments, like the self-esteem inventories and the rest of those kind of things. How do children or students feel about themselves? How are they actually engaging in school with their peers, with their sense of belonging, persistence? How well do they actually stay? And then you may actually look at some of these, you may look at institutional or systemic outcomes. Teacher retention is a big one. When we look at culture at a school or at a district, how long do teachers actually stay? When they get in there, how long do they actually want to stay at that school site? What does that culture look like to keep them there? How do families feel welcomed and engage in the actual educational process? That's a system measure. And then the access that you may actually have to AP and CTE. That's a really big one to be able to say, how does this actually impact our students that you may have? So you may have some students who feel, if you think about it, a student who's in an EL program may or may not have the opportunity or ability to actually access AP because they've not been prepared, or they haven't been given access because they're continuing to take EL classes as opposed to having an opening in their schedule to allow them to take some of these other programs. It could be an access issue. These are the types of things that you may actually see in outcome measures for the programs that you're looking at. Some of these types of areas. When we think about outcome measures, when we're talking about them, we use the terms proximal and distal. They should make sense to you. They're kind of, proximal is going to be those that are close in proximity to what we're doing, short-term program results. This will make more sense also next week when we talk about logic models. Improved student engagement after mentoring sessions. If I have a mentoring session with students, I would expect students would come to school more often. That makes sense. Distal or longer terms, long-term sustained effects. So graduation rate, post-secondary enrollment over 3 years. You expect students to want to come to school, but 5 years from now, we expect students to have stayed in school, graduated, and have started going to college. So you'll have to think about both of those. Obviously, measuring proximal outcomes are easier because they're closer in time and context to what you're doing. Distal ones are a lot harder. But to be honest with you, distal ones may be the ones that are the more interesting and the more important ones. I'm not saying engagement isn't important, but what I'm saying is that lawmakers and a lot of our larger, legislative stakeholders are much more interested in what our graduation rates look like, what our enrollment in college looks like, and maybe even some of the 11th grade cash results and the rest, because they're trying to see how are they impacted by what you're doing now, but they don't want to be patient and wait. Harder to measure, costs more money, takes more time, and takes more effort. But you may want to think, what is it that looks more important to you in the work that you're doing? You're not going to have to do this, so you can propose whatever you want, but keep that in mind. In many cases, you're looking at both proximal and distal. You're looking at things that are closer in time that are connected out to longer term measures. Your formative assessments in a classroom and how that actually impacts some of the stuff that's happening at the end of the year. Okay, so as you're thinking about what you're writing about and what you're looking at, you may want to look at both of those. Both may be prevalent to you or required. Happy to answer questions if you have them about your stuff that you're doing as well. So when you're thinking about the outcomes, here's a couple things for you to make sure that you're considering. Make sure that they're aligned with your program goals and logic model. We'll talk logic model next week. But program goals, make sure that you look at your goals and you say, are my outcomes really tied to this? If I have a goal of increasing student retention in school districts, in my school over the course of the year, I want kids to actually stay and continue to participate and actually end of the school year, but I'm measuring test scores or something along those lines that may not be connected to what you're doing. So if my goals are here, make sure that my outcomes align very closely to those. We'll talk logic models next week. Feasibility is a huge one. Make sure that it's realistic in what you're trying to measure. You have access to the data. It's relevant to what you're actually doing. and that you can actually get to it, okay? It's available, as they say. Sensitive to the expected program effects. So what that means is that when you're looking at this, sensitive, it's not like you expect them to, tear up. Sensitive means that I would expect that what I'm measuring will be impacted by what I'm doing. So if I'm actually going in and measuring or looking at some type of outcome after my program. So let's think about a program that you guys actually may be interested in doing. Let's say that you're going to be looking at PLCs. It's a program that's in your school district that you're doing or in your school. You want to look at the PLC process and see how it impacts teacher behaviors in a classroom. So let's look at this. So my program that I'm doing is we run weekly PLCs that go for 45 minutes every week. And all of my grade level teams get together and they meet in a PLC that's well planned, well developed. It's not just planning for the carnival, but it's actually something that has to do with planning instruction based upon common assessments that have been given. And we structure and strategize about what we're going to be teaching over the course of the time based upon what's covered in the PLCs. Just saying. Okay, so what I want to make sure that I do is I have some type of outcome or an outcome measure that is aligned to effectiveness of the PLCs. So I'd have to really think, what do I expect to see change as a result of good PLCs? If I were in a poorly run, poorly developed, poorly used PLC process, as opposed to a well-developed, well-run, good PLC process, does anyone have an idea? What would you expect to see different as a result of those? Would it be end of year test scores? What would anyone suggest? What would you think? Anyone have an idea?
I think it would be a lot of things, not just one specific thing.
Okay, give me one that you would think.
So I would say, like, I'm just trying to use my own experience, talking about assessments, summative assessments, like end of unit, things like that, going over scores, comparing scores, and like we use the standards-based grading. So we fill out a form that's like students who scored a 1 through a 4. And we're looking at the numbers and then talking and comparing, like, well, what did you do? What do you think went well in your lessons? And just comparing things like that.
Okay, I love it. So you'd use something that's aligned to the specific assessments and the work that you're discussing actually in the PLC process. Yes? Something
Yes.
along those lines? Okay. Do you see that that's sensitive to the change of what we're expecting to see to happen? If I used only summative CASP scores, they may not change as much. Now, we expect them eventually to get there, but they may not be as sensitive to what you're actually looking for. Now, you may be looking at assessment results and the impact on students, but you may also be looking at the culture of the grade levels. I'm sure everyone who's ever been at a school site has really had good experiences with some cultures and grade levels or the teams that they're working on, and not so good. And so that may be something that you're looking at as well. So it depends upon what you're trying to measure, but that sensitivity, make sure that you're measuring things that actually are being impacted by what you're trying to do, where it doesn't work very well. Okay. And then credible with the stakeholders. That just makes sense. You don't want to use something that people think, oh, that's stupid. Doesn't work. This is an example right here. I love this. Reading intervention for EL students might track both proximal reading confidence and distal reclassification rates and outcomes. If I only measure reclassification rates, it may be not great, but having some of that a little more proximal, this reading coefficient, the reading confidence that they have, something that's closer to what you're doing, it gives us a little more target. Again, this is adjusting where I'm flying to get us to where we need to go. That's the idea of this. So keep that in mind. That's what we're thinking about when you're thinking about the outcomes you may be using. So here's a couple of examples. I threw a few of these in for us just to kind of quickly look to be able to see. And these are some of them are things that we're doing and some of the others are doing. Early literacy initiatives. These are things that are being done in Mississippi and Tennessee. This Reading 360 that they're doing. They've done an outcome measure of % of K-3 students meeting reading benchmarks. It's a great thing to do. They do this early literacy. They're working on it. They're measuring it. An effect size of 0.22 standard deviations, which isn't great, but they did have some improvement. So it's better than doing nothing at all. A big one right now is community schools, which we're seeing in California. I was talking to a friend of mine that it turns out that we had some pretty they thought the budget was going to be worse than it was, and because of this AI boom that we're seeing right now, they underpredicted revenue in the state of California by about $1 billion a month. Just so you guys know that. It's a lot of money. So there's going to be some extra money coming at the end of this year. It's probably going to be coming in one-time funding dollars. Your governor, who has announced his presidential election, will be doing his best to spend all of that money before he leaves office at the end of this year, or at the end of next year. And so he'll be probably funding one-time grants. And the thing that he finds one of the is most important to him is this community schools model, which was $4.2 billion. The outcome measures that they have been a little bit shoddy so far. They haven't been great, but they're looking at a variety of pieces, and you'll probably see more of this coming. More money towards community schools to continue to support it after he's done. This is in attendance. They look at attendance. They look at SEL stuff. They look at family engagement, which is really hard to measure. And they're also looking at overall, ultimately, academic growth. So here's some examples that are happening right now, and they're actually doing it. Community schools is a classic example. The other one of these CTE pathways, the Golden State Pathways program is being used right now and been funded across the state. Hasn't been very well. It's actually a close neighbor of ours that's actually in charge of it for the state. It's Tulare, good friends of mine down there. But the state has been a little bit challenged in how to kind of put this together. But what they're looking at is they want to be able to say how many actual students are participating in this and doing this work-based learning completion. Have they completed a pathway? Have they gone through all of these and actually had something come as a result of it? Do they have specific industry certifications? I was just in a school yesterday talking to a program where they're working with students, and it's an independent study charter program. They're working with students to get them certified to be dental assistants. So they go in and they put them in this dental assistant program, which is a CTE type program. Well, their problem is the kids get the certificate and then they don't want to come and go back to school to finish graduating because they got a job. So it ends up being something where they're super excited. It's something they need. It's work-based. They get a certification. They can go do it. And now they don't want to go back and finish their graduate. So it's a good problem to have, I guess, in certain ways. These kids are so excited because they actually are working, but they want to get back and get their graduation rate up. But these are outcome measures that are right now happening in California, very relevant to what we're doing. Okay. Couple of things just to keep in mind as you go through. The next pieces of these are kind of what you would put into some of the write-up that you're going to be doing around outcomes. Some of the approaches that you may actually use, classic assessments, easy thing to use. We talked about assessment a lot. You may use some rubrics that you would develop, performance tasks or portfolios. The best people in the world for performance tasks, if you ever get stuck, or go ask a music teacher. Nobody does performance tasks better than a music teacher, right? That's just the case. It's a fact of life. Nobody says, give me a, they do theory stuff. We have to write stuff down, but in the end, what we really want you to be able to do is perform. It's the same idea. You can do that in a lot of different ways. And if you think really hard and well about it in education, you can do some really great performance stuff. Performance measures in classroom with math and reading and other things as well to allow them to be able to do that. We can do surveys. Panorama is a classic example. Many of you use Panorama, which is a program that actually will do some of that stuff. You can do others. Right now, there's some that are using Parsec Education, and they use these reels that are surveys that are actually a little more qualitative based and do an analysis of that, which is great. And then you can also use administrative data. Remember, you can get GPA, you get discipline data, you can get attendance data. There's a lot of ways that you can use this. So how you measure and what you measure, there's lots of options for that. Be creative and think about that. How you analyze the data, you're going to have to put that in there. What do you plan to do with it? How do you plan to get to a result? If I were to ask a question, if I were to say I'm going to implement a new family engagement program where I'm reaching out to parents weekly through a call center and then having a monthly meet with the principal program, whatever it is, if I wanted to be able to say, how is that impacting engagement of families? What are you going to measure? Well, I may actually do a survey. Well, what are you going to do with the survey results to get to an answer? Does it impact it? That's the analysis. Analysis is, what are you going to do? So do you do a pre-post comparison? Do you do match comparison groups? Those who got the calls, those who didn't get the calls, regression, discontinue. These are really much more complex. Or you can just analyze survey results to be able to say what the opinions are, qualitative and measure. Not just, it's still a valid point, but it's not statistical. A statistics approach. So what are you going to do to measure? And then what are you going to do with the data once you get it to get to your answers and your questions? Lots of ways to do that. We talked validity and reliability. Just make sure that you keep this in mind when you're thinking about these outcomes. Make sure your construct is aligned. Look at your reliability over time. Keep that in mind. Make sure that you have your cultural and linguistic, especially if you're going in and looking with parents and the rest, that you're actually doing that and avoid this bias. I love this one thing that I found that I thought that was really interesting is just to make sure we reminded you about triangulation. Now, you may remember this from your research methods class. Triangulation really is this idea of looking at more than one data piece. So I expect to see something, so I measure it in a survey. I also ask people questions about it, and then I go out and do an observation. I expect to see in all three different places a similar result. So if I'm getting one that's really high and the other two are not that high, then I have to be suspicious about that one measure and what it's actually telling me. Triangulation is a validity approach that we use where we look at multiple data pieces that are measuring something similar-ish to be able to see that we're getting what we expect. Triangulate, that's just maybe something, you use this as well in evaluation. Maybe something that you guys got in your research measurement class. And then also just make sure that it's important for us to think every time we go through this work to consider equity. What is it that is, how are we approaching this evaluation in an equitable way? Make sure that you're disaggregating outcomes, race, income, disability, EL status. It's good for us to consider how does this impact people differently? And we have a good understanding of that. Ensure they capture some of the access and opportunity gaps. Don't make assumptions based upon what you think everybody has. Make sure that you're looking at your data to be able to see, is it truly equitable to those? And do we have equal access when we're looking at it? Look at this improvement metrics rather than static performance levels. Let's see. And the reason we do that is we want to be able to say, how did someone come in and how did they leave this program? How did they grow? How did they improve over time? That's actually a useful term for us to be able to see. Maybe you have a student who came in who just didn't have access before they came into this, and by providing this access, they've grown. They're still not at the level we want them at, but they have made progress. That's an equitable-based idea, okay? And then also sometimes when we consider some of these ideas of these unintended consequences, sometimes when we focus primarily in one area, if I'm only looking at math, I'm really focusing in on that, and I'm going to offer tutoring in this, we're going to do all this, what are we not doing because we're doing something? Keep that in mind. What are we not doing because we're doing something else? That's narrowing the curriculum. That's taking away other opportunities that we could provide to students. We only have so much time with them. We have to consider what we're doing when you do something, you take away an opportunity to do something else. And then definitely testing fatigue. Testing fatigue is a real thing. Weighing the pig doesn't get your results. It's what you do that matters. Don't just keep giving them tests. Anyway, you get that idea, right? Weighing the pig at the farm at the fair. Okay, so we have dashboards, and I wish I forgot to grab. I was going to show you guys a really cool dashboard that my team uses, and I'd have to hunt for it, so I'm not going to do it right now. But dashboards are really cool right now. You guys may have seen lots of them that are out there. The classic one is the California dashboard. Fine, you can use that. It definitely includes academic behavioral. You guys all seen this? I think you have. It's going to be updated in about a week. No, in about 2 weeks. California dashboard, education, you go in here, looks like this. If you were to go in, let's look at one central unified. Let's see if that comes up. Here's central unified, just as an example. This is a dashboard of metrics. Anytime that you have a dashboard is a way for you to test over time and gives you some type of visual representation of data. California dashboard is a large one. You can see has multiple indicators: chronic absenteeism, suspension rate. It's done on this kind of gas tank or gas, is it the closer you get to one side, the more full you are, the better the colors and that blue and green and all that. And it gives you lots of different detail that you can dig down. If I wanted to look in graduation rate, it will tell me more about different types of student groups that are actually doing well, what percentage, where they actually are, and if it increased or decreased. And if I go in and look a little deeper, it will tell me something about the student groups. The all students are here, what groups are in the red, students with disabilities, Asian are in the orange, and it tells me a little bit about those. And so it has lots of different data. It's the dashboard. There's lots of dashboards out there that give us information, different things about different students or different ways to do it. In your own school, you may have some. Does anyone have a dashboard that they use in their district right now? Anyone use any that they care to? You don't have to take me to it, but you could talk about it. Anyone use a dashboard at their school site for anything? More and more are using them. I wish I would have found the dashboard. I may actually text my friend to see if she can send it to me really fast. Hold on one second. She can send it. Can you send me a link to your This is terrible. I'm asking her to do this at night when she should be home playing with her kids, not doing things that I'm asking her to do. And so when we think about dashboards, this is a way for us to be able to track and look at data over time. Useful tool for us to do as well. The other thing that you may actually pull into your outcome measures of this continuous improvement model that we talked a little bit about before, the Plan, Do, Study, Act, along those lines. Any type of data inquiry protocols that you're going to be doing, and then monitoring some of these as you go across. So you can use all of those things as your outcome measure and all the rest. Okay. And then there's just a couple of studies that are helpful for you guys to be looking at, to be able to think about what's actually being done in these practices right now that are actually happening. These things are actually being done right now using outcome measures and the rest. Classic one is this high dosage tutoring. High dosage tutoring is a huge thing right now. It seems to be the thing most people are very interested in as it relates to kind of catching up to students, because it doesn't take out time in school. It's doing more stuff before and after. It's also the AI tutoring as well. And what you're finding is high dosage, meaning that it's a good amount that's very targeted and focused, is giving you a pretty good, it's 0.37 standard deviation gain in math as a result of this stuff. It helps, and it's interesting. Right now, a lot of these grants that are coming out are asking us for focus in on programs that are actually offering this high dosage tutoring, because it does work, and it's a really popular thing right now to be able to be seen. So you can see that's one that's actually done. There's also another one, the SEL stuff is improving GPA and attendance, and then tiered support systems. These tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support programs that are actually being used. And what does it do? This MTSS. MTSS is really relevant and important. It may be a program you might be interested in evaluating at your own schools or programs that you have. Three studies that are right now. This is how this stuff is being used today in schools. This isn't just me talking about it from a random textbook. This is stuff that's actually being done right now. So to keep this idea, the things that are some of the bigger problems that come up with outcomes that you may run into as well, attribution versus contribution. This really comes down to, you'll have programs that will say, I want you to put together a study that's going to say, how does this actually work? And then I want you to justify it by showing how CASP test scores are actually impacted. Yeah, probably not a great idea. That's problem where you're coming at to say, is it really something does it contribute to the overall large scale outcome, or is it not? It's just too small, too much of a piece. So when we think about outcome measures, you really want to be able to say, how much does what you're doing really change the dial on this particular outcome. Think about that. Limited sample size or missing data. If you don't have enough folks in there, if you don't have enough data in there, it's going to be hard. Confounding variables. Do you guys remember that from your research methods class? A confounding variable. I'll give you an example of what a confounding variable is. We went years ago and did a study in schools where we were talking about doing one approach as opposed to a different approach. And we wanted to randomize it against two. We wanted to put one teacher was going to do one approach, another teacher was going to do another approach. And so what we did is we said, okay, this is great, but what happens if one of the teachers is good and one of the teachers is bad? If I'm trying to see, do kids improve with this approach, but I put them with a bad teacher, it's not the approach that's good or bad, it's the teacher. And so that's the issue that we have. That's a confounding variable. If something that confounds what you're expecting to see, that's a confounding variable. If you're doing something with a student didn't have access before you taught the intervention and other students did, that's a confounding variable as well. So we have to be careful about that. Over-reliance on quantitative indicators without context. Quantitative is great, but it doesn't tell you the why behind it. All it tells you is this one got better than that one. It doesn't tell me why this one got better than that one. You've got to make sure that you're looking at qualitative measures as well. Super important to get context. Context matters. I jokingly say this, and I may have already said this to you if you have any teachers in the room. If I were to go in and say to you, I'm going to come and evaluate you at a middle school, when would you like me to come in and evaluate you in your classroom? During second period or fifth period after lunch? Think about that. So if I look at the result of an evaluation and I did it second period or fifth period after lunch, which one is going to be which is probably going to be a better evaluation? Probably your second period, because kids are a little more awake, they're a little more in tune. You've got one time through whatever. After lunch in junior high, kids are crazy. Context matters. Okay, so when you think about measurement, context always matters under which you're actually doing the measurement. So keep that in mind. Okay, my friend just sent this to me, so let me see if I can get into it. I don't know what she sent me. Hold on. Meetings and stuff. All right. Go ahead.
All right.
Okay. You had a question? Okay, there you go. And she's still sending along. Okay, so just this last thing, make sure that you're looking at your theory of change. You know what you expect to see change. Make sure that you've got relevant and credible outcome indicators. Make sure that it's actually relevant to what you're doing. Make sure you're doing quantitative and qualitative. It's going to be very helpful to get context in what you have there. And then continuous feedback loops of improvement are great. That's that Plan, Do, Study, Act. Those are your outcome measures. So as you're putting it into your schools, just putting it into the programs that you're actually doing, just make sure that that's where it's actually fitting into the programs that you're looking at. Outcome measures, we talked a little bit before, but now as you're looking at the actual programs you're thinking about, be thinking, how will I measure that? How will it actually show a difference? What would that look like? And make sure that when you're putting it in, you identify the outcomes. I categorize them both either as a proximal or a distal as you're thinking about it. What are those things that are going to be done with the data that you have available? And then always, always, always think about validity and equity issues when you're actually putting those together. So these are pieces that you want to be considering for your final project proposal. And this was probably the shortest one we've had so far. Yeah. Okay, sorry. She's put some other stuff in there. Okay. What questions do you have for me?
I think when you're talking about these literacy programs and we're talking about the outcomes, I haven't really sat down. I'm sure I could brainstorm, but maybe just getting some ideas from you. Obviously, this is the first year that we've had like the vertical articulation within the PLC and the group levels to measure. There hasn't been any set like, okay, this is how we're going to measure it at the end of the year, which is already like I think a fallacy in what we're doing, right? But in my mind, the only thing I could think of when I was doing was the program identification is that I was like, well, I'm sure admin's going to just look at the SBAC scores, right? Like you just said, but And they're going to say like, oh, well, it worked because, or no, it's not working, or you're not implementing the strategy. So in that, I guess, context, so I'm trying to think of like, okay, how could I narrow it down versus like in these outcomes, and there are some benchmarks. We do D1, D2, iReady, but I just kind of want to get away from that basic stuff because like I feel like what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Like that could be part of that larger outcome, but is that really, a correlation? But is it it's not the cause, like, right? I think that's how we would phrase it. But what else can you add to that to kind of give me some clarity on how I could start thinking
Tell me
about it?
more. Tell me more about so this is a literacy program that you're doing this time. Is that what it is?
Yes. So it's the TLC. It's we've been using it for a while. The model's been around for a while. But this year is the first year that we got all grades fourth through sixth
Okay.
to be aligned with it. We're all using the same formats, we're all using the same cycles, we're all and it's basically the one of the outcomes is just joyful literacy. I guess it's just to be able to promote joy within through culturally sustaining pedagogy and a bunch of other factors in there. And so we're doing this at school. So I'm like, perfect, because we got a lot of pushback because we're like, people are like, no, we don't want to do that, all that whole thing. So now I'm just wondering, in what I'm measuring these outcomes, obviously it's to be better writers. Like at the end of the day, it's bringing back joy to literacy. And then, but the final stage is writing, independent writing.
Okay.
So
But that's the question I have. As if I'm a student and I participate in this, what is the what do I gain? Why do I want that student in there? What is going to be different because that student's in there? What is the expected? Me being in there, this is what's going to happen. What are the like a couple things? Ultimately, you want them to score better on the test.
right.
But what are the things you would expect that what would be the reason I would want a kid to participate in this? Like that gets us
Um,
to the outcomes. Like what would you say that you being in there helps them to blank what?
Right. So it's called cross classroom. So it's not like it's a program that we're using across all classrooms. So we're just using it for our language arts time. So for me, it's engagement because right now that's what I'm finding, right? The engagement with the curriculum, the apathy, like those types of things,
Okay.
those types of struggles. So on my end, it would be definitely engagement with the materials, finding new ways to use technology activities to get them to engage with the text, to have better understandings, and then move the cycle along through the stages of literacy.
Okay, so you actually gave me three things. First one's engagement. First
Yeah,
one's
okay.
engagement. Second one is, oh, you said something. You said I would engage with the text, something with literacy, and then the last thing was that then they would move along. They would move along in literacy as well.
The
So
stages,
so
yeah.
so if you were to say engagement, how would I know a student's engaged?
Um, Participation, um, completed work. Obviously, we're gonna do better on with grading. So, okay, you're telling me like
All
these
of
are your
those.
outcomes.
You see where that's
Yeah.
how you get it is you look at it
Okay.
and you say what is most important. Why do I if this kid's doing this, I'm going to say I know that it's working in some way, they're going to be more engaged. Okay, well, what does engagement look like? Well, engagement looks like this and this, and that's what the outcomes are. Now those are proximal outcomes because they're much
Right,
closer
short
to when you're
term.
doing it. But your distal, the one that's far away, is if they're paying attention, they're actually reading stuff, and they're actually turning in their assignments, we could assume that their end of unit test is going to be better than those who don't. And if their end of unit test is better, we can assume that their end of year test is going to be better as well. So that's where you're going to get. So yes, I could assume that distal one is going to be there, but some of those other outcomes that are closer to would be some of those engagement. So you can count most of those things, but you also may want a qualitative piece on that as well. And a qualitative piece may say, when you say engagement, engagement is not just the me reading it or
Right,
turning in my work. It's maybe what I understood about it. And maybe
right.
there could be a little bit of an interview. Maybe they've got to interview each other. Maybe you have a quick empathy interview with some of these students to say, hey, what worked for you? What did you get out of that? What was fun about that? What was good in this? I don't know, whatever it is. Tell me a little bit about the book that you understood. What were you get? That's going to get you even more about the engagement. And it will also get you about what they're kind of comprehending, understanding, all the rest of that stuff. So you could take a couple of things out of there and do it on those. And you don't have to do it with everybody either. You could do it with random sample of a couple of kids that you would take maybe 6 kids and do the interviews with. And then you count all the other kids. You see what I'm saying? So you could do pieces
Yeah.
of it. You did it.
Okay,
That's
thank you
out,
so much.
that's outcome measures, but that's thank you for doing that and helping us with this, because I hope everybody heard that's how you get to these outcome measures. It sounds very boring when you read about it, but then when you start doing it, you go, okay, you do this. And you also find that you could get quickly overwhelmed with too
Yeah.
many things. You don't want to do too many things. Thank you for doing that.
I had thought of those things, but I don't know if anybody else has this, but it just seems too simple. I think because the class
know.
is like, the like it's like, oh, we're just gonna give them a survey and that's like the assessment. But I guess that is what is measuring if we're looking at that
It
is
is.
what it is.
Yeah,
So
if
thank
you're
you.
not engaged, if you're not showing up, if you're not engaged, if you're not doing your work, there are very few kids who do absolutely nothing and score really high at the end of the year. If that's what happens, that kid's a prodigy and probably shouldn't have been in that grade anyway and should be doing something else. So if they're not doing those other things, you're not going to get to the other. So anyway, other questions? Anybody else have questions? Happy to answer. Okay. All right. Well, outcome measures are part of what we're doing. It's going to be one piece of that. A piece of what you're doing with your own program evaluation is actually looking at. And then also next week, we're going to talk logic models, which we'll give you a couple of examples of what those are. And it'll give us a little bit more about some of the measurement that we're doing. But beyond that, you guys have the freedom of time, as they say, the gift of time. I'm here if you have questions. If you don't, you're welcome to log off. I won't make you sit on here and look at me. Beyond that, have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night.
I have
Bye.
a quick question.
Sure.
Just to clarify, I know last time you had mentioned that if you're not working, you can do a program based on your environment. That's what I did
Sure.
my plan on. Is that fine?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. When you give me your plan, when you give me the identification, you're going to get 100% for the identification. You understand what I'm saying? Because you're going to get 100, but I may give you feedback and say, this is going to be hard to do. That's really what this is about. The program identification, it's for me to look at it and say, yes, no, or you're going to struggle, or let me give you some ideas or things along those lines. That's really what it's about.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a
Go
quick
ahead.
question.
Sure.
So I get a little confused on which assignments I've done, but so I did one on the benchmark advanced assessment piece.
Mhm.
And then the other assignment I did was on thinking maps.
Okay.
And so I guess I'm not really sure do you think there's a better one to focus on now?
No, whichever
Or
one works
just-
better as far as it is thinking maps, the program that you're planning to be actually look at and see how it's being implemented and used and the rest?
I was trained on it. I'm one of the like very few teachers that's actually trying to implement it. I believe in it.